She smacked me so hard my cowboy hat flew straight off and landed right in a pile of armadillo dung. That alone would have been enough. But then she jabbed a manicured finger at my chest and shouted, "I'll have your entire ranch shut down, Major Redneck." That's when the wildlife officer climbed out of her truck, pulled off her shades, and said smooth as a sniper, "That's Major Holt to you." Karen's face dropped like she realized she'd just challenged a grizzly to a wrestling match. It all kicked off 2 weeks before that slap, when a moving truck showed up next door. I was on the porch, sipping my black coffee, watching Bucky, my semi-tame deer, playing what looked like tag with one of the goats. Peace didn't last long. Out steps a woman with a haircut that screamed management, HOA, and citrus-scented oppression. She wore heels into waist-high grass, nearly rolled an ankle, then turned and yelled at a squirrel like it had done it on purpose. Clint, one of my ranch hands, muttered, "That's a Karen if I've ever seen one." He wasn't wrong. Karen Whitmore, according to Real Estate Buzz, was a recently divorced entrepreneurial consultant from the city. Her last neighborhood reportedly had a 6-person HOA board and a hedge-trimming competition. Now she'd bought land next to my wildlife sanctuary and decided she'd turn it into suburban paradise, one power move shrub at a time. Within 3 days, she'd laminated a list of rules and slapped it on my gate, without my permission. It listed things like, no mooing before 9 a.m., and all wildlife must be leashed. The peacocks didn't care and screamed at sunrise, prompting Karen to storm out in silk pajamas, flailing a broom like she was doing an exorcism. By the end of the week, she'd already reported me twice. Once for unauthorized poultry display, my turkeys, and once for visual pollution, my barn, which she described as tragically rustic. Every time, Officer Elise Rivera showed up, took one glance at the complaints, and spent the rest of her visit on my porch drinking sweet tea. We'd been friends since I left the Army and moved out here. She respected what I was building, a haven for hurt and rescued wildlife. Karen seemed to think Elise was her personal security detail. The morning it blew up, I was repairing the south fence line. Bucky was grazing nearby, minding his own, when Karen stomped across the pasture in wedge sandals, waving a photo and a plastic evidence bag. She shoved both in my face and shouted, "Explain this." It was a shot of Bucky relieving himself near her roses. I said, "That's nature for you." She snapped back, "That's trespassing." I said, "That's a deer." She huffed so hard I thought her extensions might take flight. Then, bam, without warning, she slapped me. Not a tap. It was the kind of slap that came with decades of repressed rage, failed book clubs, and too many scented candles. My hat took flight. Bucky spooked and knocked over a watering can. Karen stepped back like she realized she just laid hands on someone on their own land. That's when I heard the sound of gravel crunching. Elise's truck pulled in like divine justice. She got out slow, sunglasses on, face unreadable, like someone about to break up a biker brawl. Karen flailed her arms, shouting like she was directing traffic during a hurricane. "He attacked me," she screamed, pointing at me like I'd escaped from a zoo. Elise walked right past her, picked my hat out of the emu droppings, dusted it off, handed it back. Then she turned to Karen and, with the full calm weight of the law, said, "You just slapped a decorated Army major on his federally protected land while trespassing." Karen went stiff. You could see her brain loading. First came the confusion, then dread, then that look that says, "Oh no, I slapped the wrong redneck." She started stammering, but Elise shut it down. She pointed to the big metal sign at the gate, Holt Ranch Wildlife Refuge, officially backed by county and state grants. Not exactly subtle. Karen scrambled. "He's keeping wild animals. Dangerous ones. A fox growled at me last night." I raised an eyebrow. "That's a feral cat named Brenda. She doesn't like your perfume." Elise barely hid her smirk, but stayed professional. "You're not just trespassing, Karen. You're interfering with a state-monitored conservation effort. That's a fine. And if Major Holt decides to press charges." Karen stepped back so fast she nearly rolled an ankle again. "I didn't mean to hit him. It was instinct. Like when a deer jumps in front of your car." "Ma'am," Elise said flatly, "you marched onto his property and smacked him because of deer poop." Silence fell. Bucky trotted up and sniffed Karen's purse. She screamed and thrashed like she was being mugged. Elise folded her arms. "You need to leave. Now. And don't set foot on this land again unless you're bringing an apology and maybe a donation to wildlife rehab." Karen scoffed, adjusted her blouse, and stomped off across the pasture, her face redder than Clint's pickup. I watched her go, then glanced at Elise. You think that's the end of it? Elise lifted a shoulder. You think Karen ever quits? I looked at Bucky, who was once again relieving himself in the direction of her yard. No, I said, but I think this is just getting started. Karen didn't stay quiet long. After the slap fiasco and getting dressed down by Officer Elise, she retreated home like a dethroned queen. For 2 full days, radio silence. No yelling about zoning rules, no clipboard patrols, not even a peep about Bucky's digestive drama. Clint figured she'd finally backed off. I wasn't buying it. You don't slap a man, get checked by a cop, and let it go. Especially not if you're Karen Whitmore, self-made monarch of neat hedges and power-trip lawn policies. Right on cue, by day 3, a new sign popped up near our property line. Welcome to Pine Hills Community Association, founding HOA under review. There's no Pine Hills. This has always been Holt Ranch and grazing land, plain and simple. The only thing pine around here is the cone that clogged Karen's pool skimmer and had her calling 911 last week. But there she stood, decked out in designer jeans, a spotless flannel, cowboy boots with the tags still on, stapling her fake HOA proposal to a post like Paul Revere warning of wildflowers. The rules? Full-color printouts, bound like a glossy catalog. Clint handed me a copy like it might be contagious. Daisy read aloud between iced tea sips. Rule 1, no livestock visible to neighbors. Rule 2, all outdoor decor must match the natural landscape, swatches attached. Rule 3, all wildlife interaction must be documented and supervised. I stopped listening after Rule 4, which banned open fields after dark to prevent unauthorized nocturnal behaviors. Not sure if that was about animals or humans, but either way, it was nuts. But Karen wasn't bluffing. She made a website, drafted forms, even roped in 2 newly retired neighbors who didn't know any better. With just 3 signatures, she crowned herself president of Pine Hills HOA, and I became enemy number 1. By that afternoon, I got my first fine. Pink envelope, taped to my mailbox. The charge? Uncontained fowl exhibiting territorial behavior. The attached photo showed one of my turkeys puffed up, staring down her dog through the fence. Karen's caption, aggressive gobbling. I brought it to Elise. She rolled her eyes hard enough to strain something and told me Karen had no legal footing. Also told me not to engage. So of course I did. That night, Operation Bucky was a go. Not revenge, just educational enrichment for wildlife and a subtle message for Karen. Clint and Daisy helped build a small hidden gate out back, just big enough for Bucky to slip through if lured with strawberries. Once inside, he did what deer do, sniff, nibble, wander. To most, it looked like a lucky visit from nature. To Karen, it was psychological warfare. By morning, her gardenias were trampled, her lawn gnomes knocked over, and Bucky left 3 gifts behind. Karen marched over, screeching, tablet in hand, running a full slideshow. I nodded along, chewing a blade of grass. Daisy nearly lost it behind her sunglasses. The last slide? A deer selfie. Bucky, majestic, with one of her flamingos hanging off his antler. I told her I'd look into installing a deer crossing sign for her peace of mind. She doubled down. Next came motion sensor sprinklers pointed at the fence, soaked her own dog more than anything. Then a complaint to animal control about my geese forming a gang. Then she flew a drone to monitor nocturnal behavior, which got taken down midair by Carl the Hawk. But her real piece de resistance came the morning I found a whole army of plastic flamingos lined along the fence, hundreds of them. A bubblegum pink militia. Each one wore a laminated tag that read, a HOA-approved resident. Clint said it looked like a fever dream from a garden center. Daisy said she admired the dedication. I called every kid with a BB gun in the county, $5 a hit. In 30 minutes, that flock was a battlefield of toppled beaks. Karen watched through binoculars, her mouth pinched like stapled ham. That afternoon, another phony fine showed up, this time for orchestrating a hostile neighborhood event. She also left a note, written in glitter gel pen. For some reason, she was demanding an official HOA meeting to talk about removing me from the neighborhood for ongoing violations of community peace and aesthetic standards. I pinned the notice to the barn door, right next to a picture of Bucky wearing her sunglasses. It might have stayed in the realm of ridiculous if she hadn't escalated. Karen filed a report with Elise, accusing me of feeding dangerous wildlife too close to a shared fence. Elise showed up, one brow already raised, and asked if I'd been baiting raccoons with peanut butter again. I told her nope, that was Clint, and it only happened once. Elise looked around and found something off. Meat chunks and trail mix scattered in a pattern just beyond the fence, on Karen's side. A few trail cams I had running picked up footage of Karen, out there at night, flinging snacks like she was running wildlife sabotage drills. That changed everything. Elise filed an official report. It was no longer just annoying behavior. Karen was luring animals and then reporting them. That's criminal, especially here. Elise promised to dig deeper. Karen was moving beyond fake HOA cosplay into real environmental damage. That evening, I sat on the porch with Clint and Daisy, the sun setting, while Bucky chased butterflies out in the field. The peace was nice, but I knew better. Karen wasn't done. Once someone like her gets a taste of control, even fake control, they don't walk away. But now Elise was on it, and the truth was starting to leak through the cracks. Clint leaned back in his chair and asked, "You think she's going to try something else?" I smiled, tipped my hat, and said, "Karen's just getting started. But so are we." 3 days after Elise discovered Karen's midnight meat toss, things went from ridiculous to straight-up weird. First, Karen vanished during daylight. That was a red flag. She was the type to make sure she was seen, whether pacing with a clipboard or waving like she was running for HOA president. Now, her blinds were closed tight. Her porch light flickered on and off like a discount horror movie. Clint joked she was either training raccoons or summoning bats. Either way, not good. Elise hadn't stopped digging. She ran a search on Karen's prior addresses and checked for complaints. Then she called me and said, her name's not Karen Whitmore. Not legally. Her real name is Cheryl Adams. I nearly spit out my coffee. Cheryl Adams? Sounded more like someone who runs essential oil seminars than a person who hurls snacks to frame neighbors. Elise said Cheryl had a record, not violent, but messy. She'd been tied to at least 3 previous HOAs in 2 counties, each ending in lawsuits, land disputes, and once, a restraining order involving a plastic flamingo. Cheryl, aka Karen, had a pattern. Fake power, push people around, until someone stood their ground. This time, that someone was me. Elise needed more proof. I had an idea. I invited Karen to a peace barbecue. Not a trap, not a stunt, just food, music, and good vibes. Posted flyers, free food, live music, community fun. Clint smoked brisket, Daisy whipped up lemonade, and I added a few extra trail cams, just in case. We figured she wouldn't show, but shockingly she did. Dressed like a country star headed to negotiations, white jeans, bright red blouse, sun hat the size of a patio umbrella. She smiled like nothing ever happened and handed me a store-bought pie. Then she asked if there would be a formal forum to address Pine Hills HOA concerns. I told her the only forum was the karaoke mic, and maybe the mechanical bull if she was up for it. She didn't laugh. The evening went fine. Locals showed up, folks ate, and Bucky danced like a possessed deer near the speakers. Karen walked stiffly, handing out pamphlets about suburban rules in rural life. No one read them. Then, just before sunset, she slipped off toward the south field, where the rescued deer usually graze. I let her go, but the cameras were rolling. Later, I watched the footage. She crouched down near the fence and placed something, then walked off quickly. A bag of trail mix. Again, but this one glistened. Daisy checked it, looked like glue. Clint sniffed and confirmed, "Yup, that's chemical." We gave it to Elise the next morning. Then it all blew wide open. With the new bait evidence, Elise secured a formal warrant to search Karen's place. It didn't take long. In her garage, they found stacks of animal feed, mixed with what looked like chemical irritants. Even worse, they found hand-drawn maps of my property, marked with XS and labeled things like deer hot spot and best view of fence. It was obsessive, strange, honestly, kinda unsettling. Elise looked rattled when she told me. Karen wasn't just a nuisance. She'd been scheming. But the real curveball came 2 days later, when a local news team showed up out of nowhere. Someone had tipped off a regional outlet about a wildlife conflict spiraling into neighborhood mayhem. I had a pretty good idea who the source was. Karen strutted out of her house in full glam, clutching a binder and a typed-up statement in 16-point font. She greeted the camera crew like she was the mayor of Crazyville. I figured the smartest move was to let her talk. Let folks see what we were dealing with. While she launched into some speech about civic duty and eco-awareness, Bucky made his entrance. That deer had impeccable timing. He strolled behind her wearing a plastic bucket like a battle helmet. Karen kept rambling about rural uprisings and weaponized fauna, totally oblivious, until Bucky tripped over a mic cord, panicked, and bolted right into her. She shrieked as Bucky bumped her into a shallow duck pond. The splash was glorious. Cameras got it all. By the time Elise showed up, already looped in by the station's teaser clip, Karen was soaked, shrieking about deer terrorism, and getting checked out by EMTs for water-related stress. The video hit the internet that night. By morning, 1 million views. Karen tried damage control, of course. She filmed a porchside video claiming to be the victim of rural extremism. But the internet wasn't buying it. Especially not after Elise released verified evidence. Or when that clip of her screaming about antler warfare went viral. Clint jumped on the wave, printing tees with Bucky's bucket moment and the line, "Wildlife don't negotiate." Later that week, Elise came back with an official summons. Karen was facing multiple charges: wildlife tampering, trespassing, false reporting. And because of her past antics and those shady forged documents, she was also getting hit with fraud and harassment charges. Best part? Her bail conditions banned her from being within 50 yards of any wild animal, deer included. That night, we threw a little celebration. The ranch felt calm again. Sun dipping behind the barn, goats napping at the fence line, and Bucky standing tall like a four-legged legend. I watched him, thinking how close we came to losing it all over someone who couldn't handle the sound of a turkey or the sight of a squirrel. Clint handed me a beer and asked, "Think she's gone for good?" I looked across the field, toward her empty porch, and smiled. "She's not gone," I said. "She's just boxed in. And tomorrow, she faces court." Court day came with that eerie calm, the kind that hits right before a storm. Our courthouse was tiny, 30 seats max, and every one of them was packed. People stood along the walls, whispering, sipping coffee, passing paper cups, all eyeing the empty seat in the front row marked for Karen. She was late. The irony. Mispunctual when it came to bogus fines and imaginary HOA meetings. I sat next to Elise, wearing my cleanest jeans and a shirt that didn't have any obvious goat damage. Clint and Daisy sat behind us. Clint chewing gum like it owed him money. Daisy filming the ceiling, claiming this moment needed preservation. When Karen finally arrived, she looked like she'd walked out of a country brunch. Pastel blazer, white pants, that same wide sun hat she wore the night Bucky made her famous. Of course, she brought a binder. Nodded at the crowd like this was her show. She even smiled at the judge. Bold move, since he'd personally signed off on my ranch's protection status. The judge didn't smile back. Prosecutor kicked things off strong, laid out everything. The pattern of harassment, phony HOA power grabs, illegal baiting, trespassing, media manipulation. Elise testified first. Calm, clear, clinical, just dry enough to make Karen squirm. She listed everything. The fake notices, the toxic trail mix, the drone that ended up in a hawk's nest. Karen's lawyer kept objecting, but got shot down quicker than a raccoon in a chicken coop. Then they called me. They asked if I felt targeted. I said absolutely. I'd been slapped, stalked, fined over turkey sounds, and accused of training a deer to commit assault. The courtroom burst into laughter. Even the judge had to tap the gavel through a grin. I told them I'd spent 20 years in the military and never seen psychological warfare like what Karen pulled off, with nothing but a clipboard and a superiority complex. That's when Karen stood up mid-testimony and yelled, "He's making a mockery of this process." The judge didn't flinch. He said, "Sit down or leave." She sat there, seething. Her attorney tried the usual spin: emotional distress, fear of wild animals, concerns about public safety. But the facts told a different story. The trail cam videos, the poison bait, the maps, the paperwork behind her fake HOI, it all piled up fast. And when Elise exposed Karen's real name, Cheryl Adams, the room shifted. The courtroom buzzed like someone kicked a hornet's nest. Turns out, a few folks remembered her from another county, tangled in some gated community drama involving plastic flamingos and a petition against wind chimes. Karen didn't testify. Smart move. Her lawyer likely knew better. But her closing statement, which was read aloud, was a strange blend of self-righteousness and fantasy. She claimed she was trying to bring structure to chaos, argued that rural areas needed urban rules, and said my ranch was a rogue operation. She called me a wildlife warlord and labeled Bucky a domesticated missile. Clint nearly swallowed his gum. The judge didn't take long. Karen, Cheryl, was convicted on 3 charges: harassment, tampering with protected wildlife, and filing false claims. Her sentence? 200 hours of community service, a $5,000 fine, and 6 months probation. The best part? She had to serve those hours right at Holt Ranch, under Elise's and my supervision. Her expression when she heard that verdict was pure, bottled rage. Clint leaned over and muttered, "This beats anything on cable." Her first day back wasn't quiet. She showed up in big sunglasses and spotless boots. Elise handed her a shovel and pointed to the emu enclosure. Karen looked at those birds like they were aliens. The emus weren't impressed. Clint showed her how to hold the shovel. Daisy grabbed a lawn chair and set up like it was a matinee. Karen shoveled emu droppings for half an hour before gagging and asking for filtered water. Elise handed her a hose. To be fair, Karen didn't bail. Whether it was pride, punishment, or pure stubbornness, she kept coming back. She scrubbed water troughs, helped fix the fence, even once chased after Meatball, the goat, across the pasture. Meatball won, but over time, she softened. No more yelling. The clipboard vanished. By week 4, she asked Clint how to tell if a hen was laying or just pretending. That counted as progress. We weren't friends, but we understood each other. She stopped acting like she ran the place. I stopped seeing her as a bear in boots. When her hours were finally done, she didn't give a speech. She just left a handwritten card on the barn that read, "Thanks for the chance to shut up." Not exactly an apology, but it worked. The ranch felt calmer. No more flamingos. The turkeys went back to screaming without fear of fines. And Bucky? Still the star, especially after Daisy posted a video montage of his most dramatic moments set to classical music. The clip of him knocking Karen into the barn? Local legend. They even put it on mugs. One night, during a bonfire with Clint's questionable hot dogs, we revealed a new wooden sign at the gate. It read, "Holt Ranch Wildlife Refuge, where even the deer don't take crap." Underneath, in small print, it said, "Karen freeze since Tuesday." Then came the big twist. A month later, I got a letter from the county. They'd seen the press, Elise's write-ups, and the community buzz. They offered a grant to turn Holt Ranch into an official public wildlife refuge and learning center. More funding, more support, and a chance to teach city folks what conservation really means. I didn't hesitate. Now we've got school visits, family tours. Bucky's got a trail named after him. The buck stops here. Karen still lives next door, but she keeps to herself. Sometimes I catch her watering plants, eyes flicking toward the fence, like she's remembering how she tried to tame the wild. But she never steps over. And every once in a while, when the peacocks start shrieking at sunrise, I swear I hear a laugh from her porch. Just once or twice. We never set out to become local lore. But when you mix one furious deer, a phony HOI, and the slap that started it all, folks tend to remember. Out here, peace doesn't mean flawless. It just means balance. Nature's known that forever. Now, so does Karen.